Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. And this week, I am reviewing the episodes 6 through 10 of the third season of Mr. Mercedes as I continue my examination of the televised works of Stephen King that I never got around to on my first go-around. So thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode. And without further ado, I'm just going to dive right into the final 5 episodes of the final season of Mr. Mercedes. So I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary of each one of these episodes and then give you my thoughts on those episodes and the things that stand out. So, episode 6 from Wikipedia. Holly takes the stand in court and performs extremely well, making way for Lou to give her own statement. She hallucinates multiple times during it, but manages to keep it together. Jerome visits the father of the man Rothstein killed, finding a picture of him and Bellamy together. Ida, Pete's English teacher, informs Hodges of his recent interest in Rothstein. Bellamy approaches Pete and offers to let him keep the money, wanting only Rothstein's manuscripts. Pete offers to sell the manuscripts to Halliday, but only gives him a page until he can prove that he has a buyer ready. Bellamy almost runs Pete off the road, prompting him to shoot Bellamy in the leg with a gun he purchased using Rothstein's money. Thoughts? So we begin with Bill dreaming, with images of the night of the Mr. Mercedes job fair murders. Intermingled in the dream is his daughter, Allie, and when he jerks awake, he receives a phone call from her. He instinctively asked her who died. Now, this is a perfectly normal reaction to have when your somewhat estranged daughter calls you at 2:30 in the morning. And I love how his sleep-addled mind, having just been dreaming of murder, jumps straight to the worst-case scenario. Plus, he's Irish, and the Irish have a deep tradition / belief in premonitory death messages. She needed to call him because she had a nightmare in which Brady came back and was coming for him. Now, I hadn't been the biggest fan of the dream sequences in the show up until this point, but this one I believe was done well. And it's much more haunting to have it mixed in with reality. Combining the sleepy reality with the reality of the dream, deep in the night when reality itself is at its thinnest, it was just very nicely done without being, supernatural. It was just something I think that we all can relate to, whether we've had a supernatural experience or not. Weird things have happened to all of us deep, deep in the night between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. We've all been awakened from strange dreams. We all think that we've heard something. We've all let our minds be open to the most unbelievable things occurring in our house and in our world when the world itself isn't the world that we know it to be. So this completely worked for me. After the credits, Alma tries running down Pete, and I was less concerned for Pete as I was for Boogers. I am really not up for it if the dog dies, guys. I just can't. Before she can take the stand, Holly has a panic attack. Jerome gets Bill to help her, and thankfully Bill is able to get through to her. But it throws doubt onto whether or not Holly will be able to go through with this. And as Holly gathers herself, Bill processes the emotions swirling from the previous night's phone call and explores the relationship with Jerome, how he sees him as a son. Jerome, worried about the revelation and the honesty from Bill, or maybe because he's read the books the show is based on, asks Bill if he has cancer. As Bill and Holly head to the courtroom, Jerome goes to meet with the father of Morris's accomplice to see if he can get more information. In the courthouse on the stand, Holly recounts the horrors of Brady Hartsfield. She explained how he drove one aunt to suicide and killed the other. And as she recounts these events, Bill looks on in pride and concern. The look on his face is so moving. It's like he just wants to rush up and hug her, protect her from the world, from her traumas and the pain of having to relive this. When she's finished, Bill breaks down in his car, and it's brutal to watch. We've seen him react to the aftermath of Brady with anger, with rage, with sarcastic remarks, but it's as if he's truly accepting the trauma and emotional fallout for the first time. In a diner, Pete is visited by Morris, who starts going on about Shakespeare in a moment to showcase his literary background. This is an important scene, maybe the most important one of the season. As I stated in the last episode, the thread that's weaving through our characters is the negative impact the writings of John Rothstein has upon young men, and here we are given a moment where Pete faces off against his dark twin, a visual reminder of the road that Pete is going down. Morris threatens him as Alma wiggles her way in with Marjorie, Pete's mother, to get more information, who had confided in her that Pete has come into some money, is into John Rothstein, which all but seals the deal that he has what our criminals are looking for. After Holly's successful testimony, Roland and Lou confer. He's worried about Brady's involvement in Lou's headspace and whether or not she's going to be able to go through with this. By their fire pit, Ida and Bill discuss his emotional fallout. And while he gets a phone call, the name Saubers is mentioned, prompting Ida to discuss her concerns about her student, who is Rothstein obsessed, and the connections begin to draw closer. Then it's Lou's turn on the stand. Despite the voices in her head and the stress of the situation, she pulls through. Pete then walks deeper into the lion's mouth. Despite the dangers of a very adult, very criminal world that has surrounded him, he willingly continues to push further down this road. He strikes a deal with Andrew at the bookshop, and it's clear that although Pete may think he has the upper hand, Andrew is just letting him hear what he wants to hear. Shortly after, Pete is nearly run off the road by the black-eyed Morris. The intimidation continues, and Pete reacts poorly by pulling a gun and holding it on Morris. Morris plays it cool, remaining in control, and here the differences between these two stand out. Morris, who had begun the show out of control, is now the one fully in control despite the gun that's pointing at his head, whereas Pete, despite having the gun, is grossly out of his depth, and although he shoots Morris in the leg, he's only escalating the situation. Later, Jerome and Holly process the day's events, and Holly explains her fear of messing it up or even moving forward with Roland. Things get uncomfortable with Jerome as she asks him for a tutorial on kissing, and thank God they don't explore this. Episode 7 from Wikipedia. Pete learns that Halliday secured a buyer, but is still hesitant to give him the manuscripts when Halliday tries to renegotiate the terms of their deal. After Halliday lies to Bellamy about Pete having the manuscripts, Alma visits the store and tortures him until he admits that Pete has them, and she kills him. Pete goes into hiding, while Hodges visits Tom and asks to talk to Pete when he comes home. Both Finkelstein and the state attorney give their closing arguments, and Lou is found not guilty of first-degree murder. Raines deems her guilty of second degree, but decides that the months that she has spent in prison qualifies for her sentence, allowing her to serve the rest on probation. Thoughts? We spend some time with our Finders Keepers crew, first with Holly and Jerome. Jerome is still concerned about Holly and the state that he'd found her the previous day when she was in the throes of a panic attack. Frustrated and cornered by the conversation, she lashes out, possibly triggering Jerome with a comment about suicide. Bill steps in to assess how Jerome is doing, and looking at the files from Rothstein, he spots a young Alma on the screen. As the lawyers provide their closing statements, Pete meets with Andrew, who gives him $75,000 for a sample page, but again, as we saw the previous night, believes he holds all the cards, but he's being toyed with by the more experienced, dangerous criminals. Speaking of which, the dangerous criminals face off against each other. Morris, who senses his control is starting to wane, is threatened by Andrew and forced out of the store. Holly and Jerome talk about their own difficulties, with Holly's struggles and Jerome's trauma from his mother's suicide, as well as the fear that comes with the unknown and his reluctance to fully engage with the potential that Harvard brings. Spoilers for the conclusion of the show. One disappointment that I have is that this doesn't really come full circle, and there isn't a real resolution to Jerome as a character. That is the one negative mark that I can put on the show, but I'll get to that. This is as close as we're going to get to that particular storyline. Bill heads to Saubers' place and he speaks with Tom, who thanks him for taking down the Mercedes killer. He explains that Peter is in danger, that he came across money and stolen books, and a killer is looking for his treasures. Alma heads to Andy's store to put the pressure on him. After he fails to intimidate her, she brandishes a cleaver and cuts off his fingers, showing who the real monster is. She threatens him until he gives up Peter, and she rewards him by brutally killing him with a pickaxe. Not content with simply murdering him, she violates the body, shoving one of the fingers into his rear and smearing a message indicating that this murder was committed because of his sex offenses. Back at the Saubers' house, things are spiraling as his parents are unable to help their son, who is hell-bent on seeing this through, despite the danger that circles around him. As he continues to insist he's safe, he doesn't realize that across town, Alma continues to kill her way to get the manuscripts. If she is chaos personified, then we go back to the place of order, as Lou's verdict is read. She is found guilty for second-degree murder, and it's very hard to watch her break down. During the sentencing, Bill gives his thoughts and speaks about the difference between law and justice. He gives a heartfelt plea for justice to win over the law and appeals to the judge's better side to do what's right. Lou then speaks on behalf of Brady, and this is really fascinating to watch. The show is exploring the relationship that we have with those who commit wrongdoings against us. When it's someone we love, we have to contend with the horrible things while balancing those horrible things with the good that we once saw in them. No one is defined by just one trait, the show argues. Or as another Stephen King character may say, we contain multitudes, and this extends to Brady as well. And during this speech by Lou, and the questions and the ideas that Lou and David E. Kelley and Jack Bender ask us to question, I can't help but think of the Bill Cosby documentary that came out on HBO a few years ago. Clearly, we know that Bill Cosby has done and committed horrible things to people, real life, villainous, insidious, awful things that, make it hard to watch something as warm and kind and inspiring as The Cosby Show had been. It just casts this shadow on it. But what was fascinating about the Bill Cosby documentary was the fact that when discussing Bill Cosby, you have to examine both aspects of the legacy that he leaves behind. One is horrible, and there's no denying that. But the other aspect to it that is just you can't deny is that he is one of the most significant cultural figures in history, in pop culture history, and for the advancement of black representation. These things they cannot be discounted. From his leading man status on I Spy to the stand-up comedy to Cliff Huxtable, these things are undeniable and advanced black representation. It's just not something that you can argue with. But at the same time, he is still a monster. So when talking about one, you have to talk about the other rather than just eliminating both. So I was just thinking about that and the nuance and the fact that we seem to struggle as a society with being able to look at multiple aspects of someone, and it's hard to even question whether or not the good can be weighed with the bad. It is so much easier to just box a person and their legacy into one category to just make it easier for us to process, for sure. But life is more complicated than that. And legacy will push back against that box. And I just found this this scene with Lou really meaningful. And it doesn't say that we need to forgive Brady. She says that he is a monster. But she also says that she loved him and that he loved her and that these things can be simultaneously true. And just the fact that the show goes there, it makes it a richer show. And I appreciate them for taking the time to do that and for giving Brenda Wool the opportunity to be able to perform it as well. Judge Raines, who had been a wild card and thin-skinned throughout this season, demonstrates the deepest wells of humanity by granting Lou's time served more than enough of a sentence and letting her go. Rains and Bill share a look of acknowledgement of a job well done. And again, like I said last episode, nobody does this better than David E. Kelley. This was a deeply emotional scene. I found myself getting teary-eyed. I just got sucked into this courtroom world again. He does a good job with it. In episode 8 from Wikipedia, in the wake of her release from prison, Lou moves in with Holly temporarily and goes on a talk show with Finkelstein where she expresses beliefs that she later admits to him were Brady's, still hallucinating him. Jerome discovers Alma's hate mail to Rothstein and his file on women. Pete goes to Ida for help but refuses to talk to Hodges, so he has Finkelstein go to him and offer him help deal with the police. Pete refuses. Bellamy kidnaps Marjorie from the Saubers' home after a struggle, and Alma ties her up in the shed. They contact Pete and Tom separately, warning them both not to go to the police and telling Pete to give them the manuscripts the next day or they will kill his mother. Thoughts? Peter goes to Ida for advice. And this is a great reminder that he's just a boy, just a scared boy. She tries to get him to let the police do their jobs or to have Bill talk to him, but this scares him even more and he runs out the door. The only thing that she manages to get through to him is allowing him to be able to speak to a lawyer, and afterwards they decide to rope Finkelstein in this. As they walk out of prison, Roland, Holly, and Lou discuss their next options and next steps. Lou talks about Brady being in her head and the advice the ghost Brady has given her, which helped lead her to walking out a free woman. If you're to read this as a little bit of supernaturalism, that the spirit of Brady actually is speaking with her, then you could also argue that it wasn't a malicious haunting, and that it was the ghost of Brady as he last existed on the earth, one who finally had been connected to feelings of empathy, sympathy, and remorse. If that's the case, then it's not hard to imagine this version of Brady making amends for the crimes he committed in life. Roland then meets with Pete, and it's the come-to-Jesus moment that Pete needs to hear. He had childishly been convincing himself that he was in the clear from police involvement because he'd simply found the materials, but Roland patiently and kindly outlines the offenses he's committed and the consequences he will face if he doesn't surrender to authorities. Lou, meanwhile, begins her talk show tour and begins to spit out dangerous rhetoric, talking about taking the law into your hands and starting a revolution. Morris takes things to the next level by attacking and abducting Marjorie in a brutal, scary, and frightening home invasion scene. But the good news is Booker remains alive, thank God. I'm telling you, I can't. If the dog dies, I just can't. Alma and Morris bicker as they put her in the car, take pictures of her, and send them to Tom. Alma continues to demonstrate her sadism, mocking Marjorie, delighting in it, and sticking the dismembered finger of Andrew into her nose. Things have really escalated here as they FaceTime Pete and show themselves hitting her, mocking her, and reveling in the state that she's in. Episode 9. Holly is given ownership of Trelawney's Mercedes, which Hodges strongly disapproves of her keeping. He visits Tom to ask about Pete and notice his suspicious behavior. Jerome pieces together the evidence that he has collected on Bellamy and his murders to uncover his identity, and Ida, Bellamy's former teacher, mentions to Hodges that he was rumored to be involved with an older woman. Pete gives Bellamy one of the manuscripts to keep Marjorie alive. After finding pictures of Rothstein and Pete in Bellamy's apartment, Hodges returns to Tom and gets him to admit everything he knows. He goes to visit Alma, but she bluffs him off. Just as Bellamy discovers a locket Danielle wore in the shed, Alma attacks him and he kills her in the struggle. Okay, thoughts. We kick off the episode with Morris screaming into his phone to the voicemail of Danielle, who he still doesn't know is dead. Bill heads to Tom's house, needing to talk to him about Peter missing. Bill isn't aware that Marjorie has been kidnapped, but Bill recognizes that something is amiss and that Tom isn't telling him something. Meanwhile, Holly gets a phone call that she now has inherited her aunt's Mercedes, the same one driven by Brady back in the first season. More importantly, the show demonstrates Jerome's detective prowess as he was able to follow a lead that he had and ultimately was able to wound up being able to identify Morris Bellamy as the criminal at the center of this case. And it's a really good scene, and I'm glad that they spent time on showing Jerome having put all of the pieces together. Bill goes to Ida to get more information about Morris, and she recalls giving him the Rothstein book. It's a devastating moment where Ida has to contend with the fact that her action of trying to help a young troubled boy ultimately led to the murder of Rothstein himself. Ida's inclusion to this story has been natural, and is coming from a naturalistic place. Her reaction here means more than any bombshell revelation. Bill and Holly get into an argument about the Mercedes that Holly has inherited, and it's a great argument about the legacy of the car, what it means, and raises beliefs around inheritance and intent, and putting the past behind you and reclaiming your life. Those used as a weapon and killed dozens of people, though it's a living reminder of hate, evil, and murder by renouncing it and reclaiming it. Holly argues that all wounds can heal. The fact is, there will always be constant reminders of the horrible things that happen to us in life, but it's up to us to make the most out of what we have and move on. It also allows Lou to argue for the purpose that Brady gave to Bill. Without this awful thing, Bill would have been dead at his own hand. Instead, because of Brady, Bill found purpose, a second chance at life, and now has a family. Morris has an encounter with Pete in a church, and despite being in over his head, Pete is holding his own against the more experienced criminal. Bill heads back to Peter's house and gets Tom to admit that Marjorie has been taken, Pete is missing, he has the books, and the entire family is in danger. Despite the danger, Bill heads directly to Alma's place to sniff around. While in another room, Morris waits with a knife to Marjorie's throat. It's a tense scene with everyone a ticking time bomb. Bill is a time bomb of emotion with the resurgence of the Mercedes and the memories that it's drudged up. Alma and Morris are on the cusp of getting everything they want and have everything to lose. Despite things playing off as if everything is normal, Bill's visit serves its purpose. He rattles them and winds them up, and now he gets to wait until they make a mistake, which comes sooner rather than later as Morris discovers Danielle's necklace in the freezer. There's an attack. Alma thinks she murders him, but only manages to wound him. Taking advantage of the panicked Alma, Morris rams a crowbar through her stomach, killing her. All the wheels are off this car as it barrels towards an unpredictable conclusion. Final episode from Wikipedia. Lou decides she needs to get a job and tries to get work at the electronics store she and Brady worked at, but is turned down. Jerome encourages Hodges to see the car as a way of releasing the memories attached to it, which he seems to accept. Allie unexpectedly comes home, informing Hodges that she is pregnant and is asking to stay with him. He goes back to Alma's shed and finds it empty, Bellamy having hidden her body. After Hodges and Ida contact Bellamy and try to get him to see reason, he demands Pete meet him immediately or he will kill Marjorie. As Jerome traces Marjorie's phone, Pete and Bellamy meet, where Pete reveals that he will light the manuscripts on fire if Bellamy kills him or his mother. Bellamy decides to kill Marjorie, but Hodges arrives and shoots him, startling Pete and dropping his lighter on the manuscripts. Bellamy burns to death while trying to read them, while Hodges sees an apparition of Rothstein watching them. The Saubers family reunites. Holly returns the paperweight she used to stop Brady to Allie while she moves in with Hodges, and Lou takes Brady's old job as an ice cream vendor, now at peace. Thoughts? Dad Rock continues as Neil Young plays out against Bill's nighttime break-in of Alma's place. Despite his readiness to put this to rest, he can't find Alma or Morris. A trip to the shed doesn't provide any clues. With a gun to her head, Marjorie watches on as Bill fails to find her. Instead, he receives a call from his daughter, Allie, who has returned to town. They have a nice, quiet little reunion amid the chaos occurring elsewhere. Jerome advises Bill to get behind the Mercedes to set things right and literally take control of the wheel. Bill and Jerome then meet with Tom to discuss their options. Allie and Holly then meet, the biological daughter and the surrogate. Holly is able to speak on behalf of the version of Bill Hodges that she knows, which is not the one that Allie is familiar with. Holly is able to convey to her that she, Allie, is the single most important thing in his life, and Allie struggles with this information, as she does with the fact that Holly has been able to benefit from a warmer, more present Bill than she herself had known. When he returns to the house, she calls him out for the amount of time he spends talking about death. He brushes it off as an Irish thing. She admits that she's come home because she's been having nightmares about him, and she needs to know that she's not the reason why she dreams that he's burning. They discuss the fact that both of them are having the same dream. She then drops the bomb that she's pregnant. This is a lovely little scene. Quiet, them sitting on the swings together, holding hands. The camera keeps it tighter on their faces, just a girl and her dad, both wrestling with the past and hopefully the possibility of a future. Knowing the show is concluding, knowing Bill's fate in the books, this sweet scene with the death imagery, Bill's struggles with mortality, this scene should make you worry about what's going to happen to him. Morris calls Pete's phone, but gets Bill instead, who cuts through the bullshit and tells him what he needs to hear and what he hasn't heard yet. And Bill speaks to his shadow about Rothstein and letting go of the anger. Morris isn't having it, though, sees through it, and is now a wild ball of unpredictable rage. Jerome uses his tech skills to track down Morris's cell phone location. He informs Bill that the phone is on the move, and Bill races to intercept them before anyone dies. In the jazz club, during the face-off, Marjorie takes advantage of Morris's hesitation, knocks him backwards, and a struggle ensues, which results in Morris's nose being shot off. This guy has been in a car crash, shot in the leg, whacked in the back of the head with a crowbar, and now has had his nose shot off. It's a funny ongoing joke throughout the season. Bill arrives right on time and shoots Morris, who follows his obsession right to the death as he runs after the burning books and becomes the Burning Man from Allie's dreams. Bill watches him burn, holding his beloved precious as he dies, unable to enjoy the thing he sacrificed everything for. What's left is our time for goodbyes. Holly returns the paperweight to Allie that she used to kill Brady, says goodbye to Ida, then drives off on a date with Roland, behind the wheel of her reclaimed Mercedes and her life. The show concludes with Bill and Allie discussing the future, and despite his musings on death, he commits to not going anywhere. I'll get back to that in a second. The real button on the show is once again an ice cream truck delivery, this time with Lou as the driver. I wish that had concluded with Bill and Allie. This seems a tad unnecessary. Besides, the haunting return of the ice cream truck is how the second season had concluded, and that is all that we have for Mr. Mercedes, a show which it has an ending, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know. I think that it was canceled rather than picking up, but I mean, they've gone through the source material. I'm glad that there is an ending, and I'm happy that Bill Hodges, this version of Bill Hodges, gets to live. Like I said, I wish that the show had concluded with Bill and Allie just being with one another in the moment, talking about the future. Bill is still Bill, still talking about death, and like she says, she asks him to stop saying sad Irish things. But I think that it's true to the character and something that I was able to relate to. I thought it was meaningful. And last season we saw him be able to reconnect with Donna as he continued to make progress on himself. This season he was able to reconnect with the big albatross around his neck, his estranged daughter. So this wasn't anything that I was expecting in the show, but I love that it went there. And now they have a promise of a tomorrow. And that is... It takes everything that the show had given us, from Bill when we first meet him, to the purpose that Brady had given him, his wrestling with the legacy of Brady and the family ultimately that Brady had given him, and then it ultimately brought him to be a better person, that he can now be there for his daughter and his grandchild. So I love that. I love that. I don't love the ending with the Lou and the ice cream truck. I think that that's just, like I said, unnecessary. And I am upset that just Jerome is not at the end at all, that he isn't given a proper goodbye, that he and Bill don't have their goodbye. It just, that was the only thing that's missing. And I don't believe that everything in a conclusion needs to have a nice little button. But if everything is being wrapped up on this show, I just don't like that Jerome was being left out, because he was great. And I wanted to see a little bit more from him. But all in all, these 3 seasons and the 10 episodes across each one of these seasons for a total of 30 episodes, just a firm command behind the wheel. And as people talk about Stephen King adaptations, the best Stephen King adaptations, I don't think that things are talked about, or Mr. Mercedes is talked about in the same breath as these things. So if you are listening to this in real time, the reason why I am going back to the televised works of Stephen King that I never got around to is because after having watched Welcome to Derry in December of 2020? No, it was premiered on October. Didn't it premiere on Halloween or something? Anyway, the late fall, early winter of 2025 when Welcome to Derry came out, it led me to, review each episode, and there was a lot of conversation around Welcome to Derry. And I understand why. It's the property. It's the intellectual property. There's going to be a lot of conversation around that. But, I struggled with that show. And it just, when there's a show like that, and then there's a show over here, Mr. Mercedes, which just isn't, no one seems to know about it. And that's not a fault of the show. It's not even a fault of the audience. It's just a sad truth that it aired on a channel that no one knew about. I mean, how many of you subscribed to the Audience Network through AT&T? Was that one of your, I mean, you had to have Netflix, HBO, and the Audience Network, right? Well, of course not. No one had it. And that's what Mr. Mercedes was airing on. If it had been a Netflix show, I think people have talked about it. If it had been an FX show, this has FX written all over it, I think that people would have talked about it. I think that it was worthy of a lot of praise and more eyeballs on it, and just an acknowledgement of the craftsmanship on all levels. It's a great looking show. It's a wonderfully acted show. It's an incredibly directed show. It is just every episode is just a tight episode full of characters who are wonderfully written and incredibly acted. It's just really well done television by people who know how to make well done television. Masters of the craft, centered by a performance that for me completely redeems a character that I do not like at all, who may be one of the greatest adapted characters of in the Stephen King universe. You're hard pressed to find a better character than Brendan Gleeson's Bill Hodges. This he's just like a broken down Baloo from the Jungle Book who refines himself, and it's a wonderful thing to watch. And just the sad weight of time and grief and regret and pain and anger that sits on his shoulders with his massive frame and his sad eyes and his anger and his insults are so fun to watch. He's just a captivating character. I loved watching him, and I could have happily had 5 more seasons of this show if it had Brendan Gleeson at the lead as an acerbic, weary, exasperated private detective who's trying to get his shit together. It was a great show. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for sticking around and listening to my thoughts on Mr. Mercedes. All right, everyone, I hope that you had a good time. If you have any thoughts on Mr. Mercedes or anything that I said today, please write into StephenKingcast@yahoo.com, and may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I will see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.